Good day, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about Lesson 2 Policies of the Agrarian Reform Land Ownership in the Philippines under Spain. Introduction. This lesson focuses on the leadership systems in the Philippines during the Spanish colonial rule and how it influenced later agrarian reform policies. It explored the ways land was distributed and controlled under Spanish rule and how this unequal distribution led to the need for agrarian reforms in the Philippines after independence. For today's lessons, it examines the impact of Spanish colonial era's land distribution system in the Philippines post independence agrarian reform efforts, highlighting the resulting inequalities. Land ownership under Spanish rule. Under Spanish rule in 1565 to 1898, the Philippines had a highly unequal system of land ownership. The Spanish crown, the Catholic Church, and a small number of Spanish and mestizo elites controlled most of the land, while the majority of Filipinos were landless or worked as tenants of these large estates. During the Spanish colonial period, the Philippines experienced a highly concentrated land ownership system. The Spanish crown, the Catholic Church, and the small number of Spanish and mestizos elites held vast tracts of land, while majority of Filipinos were left in with little to no land ownership. This resulted in a large population of landless Filipinos who had worked as tenants on these estates, creating a system of economic and social inequality. Encomienda system. Encomienda system is a system that is introduced by the Spaniards. Where Spanish settlers or the encomenderos were given control over land and local people. These encomenderos were not allowed to own the land outright but had the right to demand tribute, like labor or goods, from the local population in exchange for protection and the spread of Christianity. These systems allowed the Spanish to control land and labor while exploiting the native population. The encomienda system was like a land and people lease given to the Spanish settlers. They controlled the land and the local people but couldn't own the land. In return for protecting the people and teaching them Christianity, the settlers could demand labor or goods for them. This system let the Spanish control resources and exploit the native population. The church as a major landowner. The Catholic Church became one of the largest landowners in the Philippines. Religious orders like the Dominicans, Augustinians, and the Franciscans were given large tracts of land to manage. They controlled these lands and used Filipino labor to work on agricultural estates. The church land holdings were vast, especially in the countryside, and it became an important political and economic power in the Philippines. During this era, the Catholic Church emerged as one of the largest landowners in the Philippines. Various religious orders such as the Dominicans, Augustinians, and Franciscans were allocated extensive land to oversee. These orders managed the agricultural estate and relied on Filipino laborers to work the fields. As a result, a church not only held considerable economic influence due to its land holdings, but also became significant political power, especially in rural regions of the country. Haciendas and large estates. By the late 18th and 19th centuries, large agricultural estates like haciendas became common. These were often owned by Spanish settlers or mestizos elites. The haciendas were worked by Filipino peasants who often lived in poverty and worked as tenants, farmers, or laborers in estates. Many of these estates were focused in producing cash crops like sugar, tobacco, and rice for export. During the late 17th and 18th, a type of land ownership system emerged in Philippines, and it's called the hacienda. Hacienda are those large sprawling farms often owned by Spanish settlers or mestizos or the people of mixed Spanish and Filipino ancestry. They controlled vast tracts of land and employed Filipino peasants as tenant farmers or laborers. These peasants often lived in poverty, working the land for little pay to grow crops like sugar, tobacco, and rice. These crops were then exported to other countries, bringing wealth to the hacienda or hacienda owners, while the Filipino peasants remained impoverished. This system, where small elite controlled most of the land and resources, while a majority of population worked for a little reward. This became a key feature of the Philippines economy during this period.
Next, we have the social inequality. The land was concentrated in the hands of a few wealthy Spanish landowners and the church, while the majority of Filipinos, particularly in rural areas, were landless. This created a deeply unequal society where the majority of population had little access to land or to means to improve their lives. The reason behind this social inequality in the Philippines was the Spanish colonial system. When the Spanish took control of the Philippines, they gave large amount of land to wealthy Spanish landowners and the church. The church, being the powerful institution, also controlled a lot of lands. These landowners and the church used to these lands to grow crops and money, but the local Filipino people, especially in rural areas, were not allowed to own or work in the land themselves. Most Filipino people became poor farmers who worked on land that wasn't theirs, while the wealthy few got richer. This made it hard for ordinary Filipinos to improve their lives because they didn't have lands or resources. Over time, this unfair system led to frustration and anger among the people, with contribution to the Philippine Revolution. Agrarian reform policies under Spanish rule. The unequal land distribution during the Spanish period laid the foundation for the agrarian problem that would persist long after the country gained independence. One of the biggest issues the country faced was the unequal distribution of land, a problem that began during the Spanish colonial period. Many farmers worked as tenant or sharecroppers, meaning they had no land of their own. Several policies of agrarian reforms were introduced after the Spanish era to address these issues and improve the situation for landless farmers. To solve this problem, the government introduced various agrarian reforms policies aimed at giving land to poor, landless farmers and promoting fair land distribution. However, these policies faced many challenges, and the land issue persisted for many years. Even though the government made effort to fix the land problem after Spanish rule, many farmers still don't own land. The richest landowners still controlled most of it. The reform policies did not help some people, but they were slow, incomplete, and faced many problems like politics and money issues. Because of this, the land problem is still a big challenge in the Philippines today. How Spanish land ownership influenced agrarian reform. The system of land ownership during Spanish rule shaped the policies of agrarian reforms in the Philippines in several key ways. So we have here the concentration of land in a few hands, tenant farming system, resistance to reform, and need for legal and institutional support. First, we will discuss the concentration of the land in a few hands. The legacy of Spanish land monopolies meant that the land was concentrated in the hands of the few powerful families and institutions like the church. This unfair system led to a serious inequality where only a few people have power and wealth, while most farmers live in poverty. This created a deeply unequal society which agrarian reforms aim to address. The government tried to fix this by introducing agrarian reforms or laws designed to give land to poor, landless farmers.
So for the tenant farming system, this explains that during the Spanish period that people persisted to inherit the land from the Spanish period after the independence. Under this system, Filipino peasants were inbound by unfair agreements, so they don't want to own it but work. This led to widespread of poverty and inequality among the rural population. For the resistance to reform that landowners of many whom had inherited their land from the Spanish era are often resisted agrarian reform efforts because this this resistance made difficult to implement the land reform policies when the government passed the law to support it. So that time, since the Spaniards who live in the Philippines after the independence, the landowners are often get resisted because they no longer own the land after the Spanish left the Philippines. Need for legal and institutional support. The Spanish period are also demonstrated the need of legal framework and government institution managed to land reform and ensure fair distribution. This led to creation organization like Department of Agrarian Reforms in the Philippines. So this need of legal institutional support is where they implement the policies against the dispute or should be resolved its problem about owning the land. So the conclusion for that is the concentration of land is in the hands of the few elites during the Spanish period, shaped in the agrarian problems in the Philippines. This legacy of land control continued to influence agrarian reforms effort after independence, with the significant challenges remains even today. Thank you.
So there you have it. A look at the land ownership system of the Philippines under Spain. I hope you learned something new today. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. Salamat!